And now I saw a chance to at least get a little bit of compensation. Somehow I felt that my pressure was going glimmering because the second I gave him an opportunity, he was simply going to castle away. And once he castles, what kind of attack do I really have? I really have no attack. His king is ensconced way over there on the king side, far away from my pieces, and is perfectly safe. And I'm really down a pawn with not much compensation. So I immediately play bishop takes c3 check. I ha he then he obviously has to retake with the pawn. Oops. He has to retake with the pawn. He can't retake with the queen because obviously the rook is protecting it. He can't retake with the rook either because if he retakes with the rook, then I play knight to d4 and to e4, and then the rook hangs because the rook is pinned against the king, and the rook is going to fall for it, and I'm going to win the exchange, and then I'm going to be in excellent shape. So he has to retake with the pawn, so at least he's now got isolated pawns. He's got isolated A and C pawns, and I guess that's small compensation for being down a pawn, but at least I have some compensation. So I play knight e4. Again, this pawn is still pinned. I want to put as much pressure as possible, centralize my knight. Nothing inherently wrong with that move. Overall, again, I think I played a pretty decent game over here. Not a very aggressive game. I didn't make any flamboyant moves. I think I played a pretty solid positional game, just not good enough. I lost a pawn early, and I couldn't really recover from that. And I thought he played exceptionally well in the endgame, as you'll see in a moment. He castles. Again, getting away. No more, my entire pressure on his king is obviously completely gone up in smoke. I played rook takes c3. That has a chance. That really wins the pawn back temporarily. I mean, so he plays queen takes b7. I obviously saw that he could do that, but then now really I've given up an attached pawn for his isolated pawn. But again, by doing this, my pieces are more centralized. My pieces are in a little better shape. So then I played rook takes c1, rook takes c1. Again, that also might have been a bit of a mistake, as it allowed him to grab control of the open file. A moment ago before I did that, if he would take my rook, for example, I take it with the knight. I've got a lot of pressure on this pawn, and so maybe I could have kept and tried to keep control of that file. But I played rook takes c1. He plays rook takes c1. Knight d2. Uh, this pretty much forces him to trade off the knights. If he doesn't trade off the knights, and I trade off the knights, for example, then he has to double his F pawns, and there's really no reason for him to do that. And if he does trade off the knights, which of course he did, knight takes d2, queen takes d2, then again I feel like I have a pretty strongly placed queen. We both have queens on the 7th rank, but he has to protect the pawn somehow. Queen b1. His other option, rook a1, which I think was much weaker. But queen b1, as you can see, it gives me at least a better placed pawn. It gives me a queen. It gives me a 7th rank queen, where if I can get my rook in there, maybe I can cause a little bit of havoc. So he's still up by a pawn, but I have a little bit of the initiative. I play rook d8. There's really no other file for my queen to be on, for my rook to be on. He plays g3. I play g6. I couldn't really try to double. Obviously, it's a wonderful thing if you can do it to try to double your major pieces on the opponent's 7th rank. But I really couldn't do that over here. For example, if I played my queen over here to, to e2, excuse me, he simply plays rook c2, and my queen has to get off the 7th rank altogether. Unless I put the rook in front, but again, I wasn't going to be able to double my major pieces on that rook, that's for sure. On that rank, that's for sure. See, he plays queen c2, queen a5. I don't want to trade off the queens because I'm down by a pawn. I want to try to really keep the queen and see what I can do to force a draw. He plays a4, starting to advance it, but also preventing it from being vulnerable to rook d2. And then the queen might have to move, and then I'd have a double attack on this pawn. He needs to protect that pawn, so he moves it to a4. I play rook b8, trying to eventually put the rook over here and maybe trap the pawn that way. Queen c7. This forces me to trade the queens, obviously. That was really a key move. After this, at this point, I didn't see queen c7 at first, and I thought I was in pretty good shape all of a sudden. For example, I'm obviously threatening to put the rook over here. So let's say, for example, he were to play, I don't know, let's say for example rook b1, I would play rook b4. He's got a trade off on this file, and then again my queen I think is a little bit better placed over here than his queen is. If he plays some other move, I don't know, let's say for example rook d1, then this pawn is basically going to hang because, well, actually, if he, then he'd have to defend it with rook a1, and once he does that, he's in really a defensive position. You can see my pieces are on the offense. Both of his major pieces are tied down to protecting this pawn, and eventually I can, do some other things across the board. But this, on the other hand, queen c7 really forces me to trade off the queens. Anything else in this pawn is going to hang. If I move the queen, well, if I could move the queen to well, I can't move the queen to c7 obviously because then the rook hangs. If I move the queen here, I suppose then he can trade off the queens anyway. If I move the queen here, then this pawn hangs, etc. So instead, I played queen b6, and again, if I'm going to trade off, at least I'd like it to be I'd like to trade it off on my terms. I want my rook to be able to get out at the time of trading. So he plays queen takes b6. That was his strategy to begin with. I play rook takes b6. Again, in general, it's a good strategy. If you're going to trade things off, if the opponent is threatening to trade things off, at least they could be on your terms. Put your piece in a position where you can allow another piece with the trade to move into a better position. Certainly my rook is better off on b6 than it was on b8 because now the rook at least has the option to get to any of these files up here, whereas in the back rank it could only go behind this pawn, in which case it would be an extremely, extremely passive position. He plays rook c4. Now we both have to get our kings involved. King g7, e4, trying to advance. Obviously, good move. He doesn't. He needs to advance his king also, but first he wants to make sure his pawns are as far advanced as possible. I play a6, allowing the rook to move back and forth. King g2, king f6, f4. Excellent move. Again, he played this endgame extremely well, I think. And, I'm still hoping for a draw. Obviously, I know I'm not going to win this game at this point, but a draw is not beyond the realm of possibility. Very often in a king and rook endgame with pawns, a one-pawn advantage is very often not enough to convert into a win. So my strategy is really to force him to overcommit his pawns and maybe pick one off, or maybe somehow force a position where he can't advance them. King a6, get the king as centralized as possible. Then he plays a5. He wants to put pressure on the rook. He wants to decrease the area. If he can trade off the rooks, that's probably good for him. Now his king has to be closer. He doesn't want to trade it off right this second because then my king is going to be able, well, I get my king probably wouldn't have time to get all the way over and capture this pawn and queen this pawn before he forces a pass pawn. So I guess my king is pretty much confined to this side of the board anyway. So really he could trade off the rooks at any time. And I, on the other hand, don't want to trade off the rooks because as soon as I trade off the rooks, I've pretty much lost. Because, like I said before, with 4 pawns on this side against 3, he can force a passed pawn unless my king is there to defend. And so he can really just march his king all the way around, take my pawn, queen his pawn, and if I come over to defend, then he can create a passed pawn on this side. So I don't want the rooks off the board. So I have to play rook d6. I don't want to take it off that file, because if I take it off that file, for example, if I put it over here on b7, then he plays, then he just plays rook c6 check, and he wins the pawn and he wins the game. But in any case, if I take it off this rank, then the only way to defend this pawn would be to put the rook behind it on the a file, and that's certainly not good. So that really was my only choice. He plays rook c5, keeping my king on on the rank where it is. I play king d7. I have to get my king in the middle. I have to hedge my bet. I have to make sure that he doesn't have enough room on either side. He plays king f3. And here is probably where I made my biggest mistake. Here is probably where I lost the game. At this point, again, I'm down a pawn. I'm hanging on for dear life, but I think it's still possible for me to draw with perfect play. I played rook d2. Obviously, the reason to play rook d2 is to try to threaten this pawn. Then if he moves the pawn up, maybe I can move the rook in behind it. I can go back and forth, threaten the king. I can check back and forth and try to get a perpetual check, although it's not going to get a perpetual check, but at least I can try to cause a little havoc to the point where maybe I can get a draw out of it. But the reason why that was a mistake is very simple. He simply plays rook d5 check, and now he's traded off the rooks. And he's traded off the rooks with enough time to get his king over to defend the pawn. He plays rook takes d5, e takes d5, king d6. Then he plays king e4, f6, but again he just simply methodically works me over. King d4, I have to play h6. I can't move my king because then I have to give ground. So he plays g4, h5, g takes h5, f5. He's closing me down so that I have no options. I play h4. He plays h3, and now I have to move. I have to give away. I play king d7, king c5, king c7, d6 check. I play king d7. Now he plays king d5 check, and now I resign the game. And the reason why I resign is very simple. I have to give way. I have to either move here or here. If I move here, he could simply come over here. He could take this pawn and queen this pawn. If I move here, then he can come here, take this pawn, queen this pawn. There's nothing I can do to defend anymore. I have to back up to the back rank, and he's going to win the game. So again, this is a positional game, a very, close to the vest, tightly played game, but it was very instructive in terms of, I guess not to lose a pawn in the opening from now on and think you could automatically make it back with some pressure. So thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.